The year was 2101. Humanity had already faced countless struggles in its long history, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to come. It all started with the arrival of the Tharkar. The Tharkar were a species from a distant star system, light years away from Earth. They came in peace, or so it seemed. Their ships, sleek and massive, appeared in Earth's atmosphere with no warning. At first, humanity watched in awe as the alien vessels hovered above the major cities, emitting a soft hum that felt almost peaceful. The sky, once a place of mystery, now felt like a bridge between the stars. At first, there was excitement. The leaders of the world gathered in emergency meetings to discuss the new arrivals. The Tharkar spoke in a smooth, melodic language, their words translated to every nation's language through an advanced translator device they shared. Their message was clear. They had come to offer advanced technology and knowledge. In return, they asked for peaceful cooperation. The people of Earth, tired of endless war, poverty, and the threats of climate collapse, saw the promise of a new era. The possibility of peace and prosperity felt like a dream come true. The United Nations, the European Union, and governments around the world quickly made the decision to welcome the Tharkar as allies. "They offer the cure to our planet's struggles," said the President of the United States, standing before the camera in a moment of historic significance. This could be the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. But the excitement was short-lived. At first, the Tharkar's presence seemed benign. Their technology, far more advanced than humanity's own, began to change the world. They brought devices that could purify water, heal illnesses, and enhance food production. They promised clean energy sources, unlimited and safe, to power cities and industries. Humanity saw itself on the verge of a golden age, a new era where every human being could prosper. But peace, it seemed, was not what the Tharkar truly wanted. Months after their arrival, the cracks in their diplomacy began to show. They had begun to influence world leaders, shaping policies that seemed harmless at first but soon began to control global decisions. The advanced technology they offered was slowly being used for purposes that humanity hadn't expected: military, applications hidden behind the promise of peace. It began with the global surveillance systems they set up. Earth's governments, feeling the need for security in the face of this new alien presence, allowed the Tharkar to install satellites, cameras, and drones that monitored every major city. They promised it would be for peacekeeping, but soon every corner of Earth seemed to be under their watchful eye. The Tharkar then began taking control of Earth's most strategic resources. With their superior technology, they began to mine the Earth's rare minerals, extracting what they needed with ease. At first, it seemed fair enough. The Tharkar had technology to make the process more efficient. But soon, these resources were being shipped off-world, to a place no one knew. Humanity's suspicions began to grow, and whispers of betrayal spread throughout the global population. There were reports of strange disappearances, scientists who had worked with the Tharkar suddenly vanishing, engineers who had helped them with their projects disappearing without a trace. People began to feel something wasn't right, but the Tharkar were always there, offering reassurances, convincing the people that everything was fine. "Humanity has nothing to fear," said Korik, the leader of the Tharkar delegation. He had a calm, soothing voice, and his eyes seemed to always radiate kindness, making it hard for anyone to truly distrust him. "We wish only to help your people. All we ask in return is cooperation." For a while, the world leaders continued to believe the Tharkar. The promise of peace was too strong to ignore. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet resistance began to form. Scientists, military leaders, and ordinary citizens started to realize the truth. The Tharkar were not here to help. They were here to dominate. The moment of truth came in 2102. The world watched as the Tharkar announced a new global initiative, a peace treaty that would grant the aliens control over Earth's resources. They declared that the human race was too fractured, too weak to manage their own future. They would take over the planet's military operations, they said, to maintain peace. The people of Earth were stunned. This was not peace, it was submission. The Tharkar were not here to help humanity thrive. They were here to enslave it. At first, many leaders tried to reason with the Tharkar. They made desperate appeals for cooperation, hoping to find a peaceful way out. But the Tharkar were cold, unyielding. They had seen all they needed to see. Humanity had failed. "We have given you the chance," Korik said, his voice now devoid of warmth. "Now we take what is ours. You will fall in line, or we will ensure your extinction." The first wave of violence came shortly after that declaration. The Tharkar unleashed their weapons, technology far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. They controlled satellites that could strike from space, drones that moved faster than any human could react, and ground forces that tore through cities with terrifying efficiency. The Tharkar showed no mercy. Humanity's defenses were obliterated within hours. World leaders scrambled, but their attempts to form a united front were useless. There was no force on Earth strong enough to stop the invaders. In the chaos, the truth became clear. Earth was alone. And yet, despite the Tharkar's power, humanity didn't give up. In every major city, groups of resistance fighters began to form. Ordinary citizens, soldiers, and former military commanders came together to fight back. They knew they had no hope of winning against the Tharkar in a conventional war, but they could fight back in other ways. They began sabotaging the alien supply chains, stealing their technology and hacking their systems. The resistance, small at first, slowly grew in strength. People who had once been afraid to speak up now stood side by side, united by the desire to defend their home. "Don't surrender," one resistance leader, Lieutenant Maria Vasquez, said to her small group of fighters. "We fight for our children, for our future. We will never give in." But humanity had made one mistake. The Tharkar had underestimated something fundamental about Earth: human resilience. The aliens, with all their advanced technology, had assumed that humans would fall quickly. They believed humans would surrender, that they would bow before superior power and beg for peace. But humanity did not beg. Humanity fought. And as the alien invaders continued their attacks, one question echoed through the minds of those who resisted. Would humanity be able to stop the invasion? Would Earth, after all this time, finally learn that peace was not a gift but a struggle? In the wake of the Tharkar's brutal attack, Earth's cities smoldered. What had once been bustling metropolises were now silent, shattered landscapes. The once mighty skyscrapers that reached for the sky lay in ruins, their steel and glass now twisted and broken. The planet seemed to be drowning in despair. But even in the darkness, humanity's spirit was not extinguished. A fire began to burn, a fire fueled by the shared desire to reclaim their world. As the smoke cleared and the dust settled, small groups of resistance fighters began to form. They were ordinary people, doctors, engineers, teachers, and soldiers who refused to accept the fate the Tharkar had prepared for them. They had lost loved ones, seen their homes destroyed, and watched their cities burn, but they would not lose their world. The resistance didn't start with grand plans or well-organized strikes. It began with whispers. People, hiding in the shadows of collapsed buildings and ruined homes, spoke of fighting back. A former soldier named Alex Pierce, who had seen the best and worst of warfare, became one of the first to rally others to the cause. He had once served in Earth's military, and he knew how the Tharkar fought. He knew their technology and he knew their weaknesses. "We can't fight them the way they fight us," he told the small group of survivors gathered in a ruined subway station. "But we can outsmart them. We know our world better than they do." At first, the resistance was small. They had no formal structure, no funding, and no powerful weapons. But they had something the Tharkar couldn't understand: the will to survive, the drive to protect what was theirs. They began using the Tharkar's own technology against them. Earth scientists, who had once worked with the aliens, had secretly been collecting data, analyzing the Tharkar's weapons and systems. They shared their findings with the resistance, providing them with the knowledge to hack into the alien systems, disable their communication networks, and even use the invaders' own drones as weapons. "It's not about brute force," said Dr. Evelyn Markham, a former scientist at one of the alien research facilities. "It's about using what we have, not what they want us to use. We'll fight with our minds." At first, the Tharkar barely noticed the resistance. They were too focused on maintaining their control over Earth's resources, too certain that their overwhelming power would crush any human effort to fight back. But every small victory the resistance scored made a difference. The Tharkar's once unbroken lines of communication began to falter. Supplies meant for their war machine began disappearing. Shipments of vital resources never reached their destinations. Humanity was learning, adapting. The resistance was starting to show the Tharkar that Earth was not a planet that would bow to conquerors, no matter how advanced their technology was. In a hidden underground bunker in what used to be Paris, a larger resistance cell was formed. This new group, made up of representatives from every surviving nation, was the beginning of something bigger. They called themselves the Global Coalition. For the first time since the invasion, Earth's people were uniting, not under the banner of one country, but as a single planet fighting for its survival. "We've been divided for too long," said Maria Vasquez, a former military officer turned resistance leader. "This is our world, and if we don't fight for it together, there will be nothing left to fight for." The leaders of the Global Coalition knew they had to act fast. The Tharkar had taken over most of Earth's major cities, and their control over the planet's resources was tightening every day. The alien forces had grown confident, almost complacent. They believed that humanity, in its fear and desperation, would eventually surrender, as they had seen so many other species do before them. But humanity's defiance was about to take the Tharkar by surprise. The first major victory came when a small group of resistance fighters, led by Alex Pierce, managed to infiltrate one of the Tharkar's supply stations. The mission was risky. It required them to sneak past heavily armed alien soldiers, dodge sophisticated surveillance systems, and disable the Tharkar's automated defenses. But they succeeded. They destroyed a key supply depot, interrupting the flow of vital materials to the Tharkar war machine. The attack was small, but its impact was enormous. It showed the Tharkar that the resistance was no longer just a nuisance, it was a threat. The message spread like wildfire. Resistance cells across the world began to coordinate their efforts. They didn't have the numbers to wage a full-scale war against the Tharkar, but they didn't need to. Every strike, every sabotage, every victory made the invaders nervous. Humanity was learning how to fight back, how to disrupt the Tharkar's plans, how to turn the tide in their favor. As the weeks passed, the resistance grew bolder. They targeted alien supply chains, freeing captured humans and sabotaging alien factories. The Tharkar, once confident in their control, were now scrambling to defend their assets. But the resistance was everywhere. They were in every city, in every nation, working together like a network of veins pumping life back into Earth's heart. The Tharkar's arrogance had been their biggest mistake. They thought they could conquer Earth with little resistance. They thought that the humans, so divided in the past, would be easy to subdue. But humanity had proven them wrong. Maria Vasquez, now a leader in the Global Coalition, addressed the growing army of resistance fighters in a secure transmission. "We have shown the Tharkar that we are not weak. We are not their slaves. We are the defenders of Earth, and we will fight not just for our freedom, but for our future." It wasn't just about taking back what was lost, it was about showing the Tharkar that humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and determination could not be easily broken. Even when faced with the greatest odds, humans could always find a way to fight back. Meanwhile, the Tharkar, sensing that their control was slipping, began to increase their pressure on Earth. They sent in more advanced troops, reinforced their defenses, and began deploying even more destructive weapons. The alien leaders were growing frustrated, their patience thinning. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought the human race would be an easy conquest. But the longer the resistance continued to strike back, the more it became clear that Earth was not a planet that would simply roll over. Back in the heart of the resistance movement, the leaders knew that the next phase of their plan was crucial. They had to strike at the heart of the Tharkar's operations, destroy their command center, disable their communication networks, and send a message that Earth would no longer bow to any invader. "We're ready," said Alex Pierce, standing before the assembly of resistance leaders. "This is our chance. If we can hit their command ship, we'll disrupt everything. Their war machine will grind to a halt." The resistance fighters had grown stronger with each passing day. They had learned to work together, to fight as one. The human spirit, once thought to be fragile in the face of such overwhelming force, had proven to be far more powerful than the Tharkar had ever imagined. As the plan to strike at the heart of the Tharkar's operations began to take shape, Earth's resistance stood united, no longer a scattered group of fighters, but a force to be reckoned with. The fight for Earth was only just beginning, but the Tharkar had already made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and humanity's fight for freedom was about to enter a new, more dangerous chapter. As humanity's resistance grew stronger with each passing day, the Tharkar began to realize that their once unquestionable control over Earth was slipping. The alien invaders had underestimated the human spirit, the sheer will to survive, to adapt, and to fight for what was theirs. The cracks in their invasion plan were becoming too wide to ignore. In the underground bunkers and hidden cities of Earth, the resistance continued to grow. Yet despite their successes, there was still one major question that had remained unanswered. Why had the Tharkar come to Earth in the first place? What had they hoped to gain by conquering a planet that, in the grand scheme of the galaxy, seemed so insignificant? Dr. Evelyn Markham, one of the leading scientists within the Resistance, had been working tirelessly to understand the Tharkar's technology. She had once been a researcher working with the aliens before the invasion, studying their advanced weapons and systems. She knew their technology better than anyone, and she believed that there was more to the invasion than just resource extraction. There was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. One night, as she pored over alien data from the Resistance's previous missions, something caught her eye. A series of encrypted files locked away in the Tharkar's most secure systems contained information that had never been shared with Earth's leaders. This was the key, the truth about the Tharkar's motives. The file detailed something astonishing. The Tharkar weren't just conquerors. They were running from something. They had a secret. Their empire, vast as it was crumbling. For centuries, the Tharkar had been the most advanced species in the galaxy. They had conquered world after world, spreading their influence far and wide. But now they were facing an enemy of their own, a shadowy force that had begun to target their empire. The Tharkar's once great military was being overwhelmed by this mysterious adversary, and they were desperate. That's when they turned to Earth. The Tharkar had believed that the humans, divided and technologically inferior, would make easy targets, but their real plan was much darker. Earth's resources, especially its position in the galaxy, held great strategic value. The Tharkar had not only come to conquer the planet, they had come to use Earth as a base, a place from which they could regroup and rebuild their war machine. In essence, Earth wasn't just a conquest, it was a refuge, a new home for an empire on the brink of collapse. Dr. Markham realized that humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something much bigger. The Tharkar had invaded Earth because they needed it, and if humanity failed, the Tharkar would settle in permanently, turning Earth into a resource-rich colony to fuel their war efforts. She immediately shared this discovery with the Resistance leaders, who were shocked by the revelation. The Tharkar weren't just invaders, they were desperate refugees trying to save their failing empire by any means necessary. "This changes everything," said Maria Vasquez, the Resistance leader. "We've been fighting for survival, thinking this was just about their resources. But if they fail here, their entire empire could collapse. That's why they won't leave. They can't afford to." The news spread like wildfire throughout the Resistance. Humanity now understood the true stakes of their battle. The Tharkar were not only trying to conquer Earth, they were trying to save themselves. But the more humanity learned, the more it became clear. Earth was not a place to be conquered. It was a place to be defended. With this newfound knowledge, the Resistance decided to launch a more daring strategy. They knew that if they could strike at the heart of the Tharkar's operations, they could not only disrupt the invasion, but potentially bring down the entire empire. The Tharkar had grown too reliant on Earth's resources. If they could cut off their supply lines, weaken their forces, and disrupt their technology, the invaders could be defeated once and for all. The first major step in this new strategy was to strike at the Tharkar's command center, a massive ship that hovered just beyond Earth's orbit. This was where the Tharkar coordinated all their operations on the planet. It was a heavily protected fortress, surrounded by a fleet of alien warships and drones. For weeks, the Resistance gathered intelligence, infiltrating Tharkar communication networks and monitoring their movements. They had learned much since their first small victories, and now they had a clear plan. Alex Pierce, who had become one of the most respected leaders within the Resistance, was the one who led the mission to strike at the heart of the Tharkar's operations. His team, made up of the best and brightest fighters, engineers, and strategists the Resistance had, was ready to take on this dangerous task. "We hit them where it hurts," Alex said, standing in front of his team. "If we can disrupt their communication systems and disable their fleet, they'll be blind. We'll take down their strongest position, and they won't be able to respond in time." It was a risky move, but it was the only way forward. The plan was set in motion. Under the cover of darkness, a small group of resistance fighters, including Alex and Dr. Markham, boarded a stolen Tharkar stealth ship. They were able to bypass most of the alien defenses, using their knowledge of the Tharkar's technology to their advantage. It wasn't long before they reached the massive command ship, the Dread Eclipse. Inside the Dread Eclipse, the Tharkar were already aware of the growing resistance. The alien leaders were discussing their next steps, unaware that their fate was about to change. Dr. Markham worked quickly, using her deep understanding of the Tharkar systems to plant a virus in the ship's control system. It would be the perfect blow, disabling the Tharkar's ability to communicate and respond to the Resistance's growing attacks. "We don't have much time," Dr. Markham warned. "If we don't do this now, they'll be ready for us." The team moved swiftly, planting the virus deep within the ship's central core. Once activated, it would spread through the entire fleet, rendering the Tharkar blind and defenseless. But just as they were about to make their escape, they were detected. Tharkar security forces swarmed the corridors and a battle erupted. The resistance fighters fought valiantly, knowing that their mission was now even more important than ever. Alex, leading the charge, managed to clear a path for Dr. Markham and the others to escape. "Go, I'll cover you," Alex shouted, his voice filled with urgency. As the virus began to spread through the ship, the Tharkar's communications faltered. Their warships, once in perfect synchronization, now became disorganized. The Tharkar were in chaos. The resistance fighters managed to escape just as the virus began to cripple the Dread Eclipse. Back on Earth, the effects were immediate. The Tharkar fleet's command structure had been shattered. Their forces were confused, their supply lines disrupted. It was a victory, but it was only the beginning. The Resistance had struck at the heart of the Tharkar's operation, and in doing so, they had sent a message that would reverberate throughout the galaxy. Earth was not a prize to be taken. It was a planet that would fight for its freedom, no matter the cost. But the war was far from over. The Tharkar were still strong, and their desperation would drive them to even greater extremes. Yet humanity had learned the most important lesson of all. No matter how powerful the invader, the will of the human spirit could never be underestimated. The Dread Eclipse had been crippled, and with it the heart of the Tharkar's invasion. The Resistance's bold strike sent shockwaves through the alien ranks, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. The Tharkar, for the first time, were forced to confront the possibility that they could be defeated. But despite their setbacks, they were not yet finished. The battle was far from over. On Earth, the victory was celebrated. The global coalition, the alliance of resistance forces from all around the world, had struck a decisive blow. News of the mission's success spread like wildfire, reigniting hope among the survivors. Humanity's spirit was stronger than ever, and their confidence grew with every small victory. For the first time in months, people dared to believe that they could win. Maria Vasquez, one of the leaders of the global coalition, addressed the world in a broadcast. "We've shown them that we are not weak," she said, her voice steady but filled with passion. "We've taken down their most powerful ship, their command center. This is proof that Earth is not a planet that can be conquered. We will fight for our future." Her words were met with loud cheers from resistance fighters across the world. The alien invaders were no longer seen as an unstoppable force. They were vulnerable, just like any other enemy. Humanity had proven that they could fight back. Against the odds against an empire far older and more powerful than they had ever imagined. But the Tharkar were not ones to admit defeat so easily. Their arrogance, once their greatest strength, was now their greatest weakness. They had underestimated the resilience of humanity, but they were quick to adjust. They regrouped, reinforced their ranks, and began to devise a new plan. If they couldn't win through sheer force, they would try something else. They would break humanity's resolve, crush their hope, and force them to surrender. The Tharkar began to escalate their tactics. They deployed new, more deadly weapons that were designed to instill fear and despair. The Resistance was forced to adapt once again. Humanity's victories had been hard-earned, but it was clear that the war was far from over. In fact, the Tharkar were preparing for a final push, one that could change the course of the war. In the secret command center of the Resistance, Deep beneath the ruins of Paris, the leaders of the global coalition gathered for an emergency meeting. They knew that the Tharkar were planning something big, something devastating. Maria Vasquez, Alex Pierce, and Dr. Evelyn Markham were joined by military commanders, engineers, and strategists from across the globe. Their faces were grim as they reviewed the intelligence reports. "They've been quiet for too long," Alex said, his voice low and serious. "We know they're planning something. It's only a matter of time before they strike." Dr. Markham nodded in agreement. "They've been working on new weapons, something far more advanced than what we've seen so far. We don't know exactly what they have, but we know they're preparing for a final assault." Maria stood at the front of the room looking at the faces of the resistance leaders. "We've made progress, but we're not done yet. We can't afford to let our guard down. If we want to win, we need to strike first." There was a pause as everyone absorbed her words. They all knew the stakes. The Tharkar were preparing for something massive, something that could crush the resistance once and for all. But humanity had already shown that they were capable of the impossible. If they were going to win this war, they had to act fast. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Maria continued. "We've already taken out their command ship. Now it's time to target their main power source. We know they've been drawing energy from Earth's core to fuel their war machines. If we can disrupt that, we'll bring their entire operation to a halt." The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. The Tharkar had been using Earth's natural resources to power their weapons and ships. They had set up massive energy siphons that tapped into the planet's core, drawing out immense amounts of energy. If the resistance could destroy these siphons, the Tharkar would be left without the power they needed to continue their invasion. "Alex, you're in charge of the ground operation," Maria said, turning to him. "We'll need to infiltrate the main power station in the Himalayas. The Tharkar have set up a high-tech fortress there, but I know you and your team can do it." Alex nodded. He had led dangerous missions before, but this one would be the most difficult yet. "We'll get it done. We'll take out their power supply." Meanwhile, Dr. Markham and a team of engineers would work to disable the Tharkar's communication systems, ensuring that the Resistance's movements remained undetected until it was too late. With the plan in place, the Resistance fighters went into motion. Teams were assembled, weapons were gathered, and preparations were made. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and everyone knew that this mission could be the turning point of the war. As the Resistance fighters set off toward their respective targets, the Tharkar were not idle. They had noticed the growing resistance and understood that the war was becoming more complicated. Their forces were spread thin, and they had lost too many ships and resources in the recent battles. But they were far from finished. They had one last weapon to unleash, one that they believed would finally break humanity's spirit. On a massive ship that orbited the planet, the Tharkar Command Council met in secret. Korik, the alien leader, stood at the head of the table. His alien features, once calm and confident, now showed signs of frustration. The humans were proving to be more resilient than he had anticipated. "We must break them," Korik said, his voice cold. "We cannot allow them to continue. The time for subtlety is over. We will deploy the Omega Bomb." The Omega Bomb was the Tharkar's ultimate weapon. It was capable of wiping out entire cities in a single blast, erasing all life within a vast radius. The weapon was designed not just for destruction, but for psychological warfare. Its sheer power would devastate the human population, breaking their morale and forcing them to surrender. Korik's eyes glowed with a sinister light. "We will show them what happens when they defy us. We will make an example of them." As the Omega Bomb was prepared for launch, the Resistance fighters moved into position. Alex and his team reached the Tharkar's power station in the Himalayas, where they encountered fierce resistance. The alien fortress was heavily guarded, and the soldiers inside were ready to defend their power source at all costs. But Alex's team had trained for this moment. They fought with everything they had, pushing forward inch by inch. Meanwhile, Dr. Markham and her team successfully infiltrated the Tharkar's communication hub, shutting down their satellite systems and scrambling their ability to coordinate the attack. The Tharkar were now blind. But just as the Omega Bomb was about to be launched, the resistance struck. Alex's team planted explosives at the heart of the power station. and as the Tharkar's energy siphons began to overload, the entire facility erupted in flames. The explosion sent shockwaves through the alien network, knocking out their energy supply. The Tharkar were thrown into chaos. Their once impenetrable fortress was now in ruins, and their greatest weapon, the Omega Bomb, was disabled. Humanity had once again proven that no matter how strong the enemy, no matter how advanced their technology, the human will to fight could not be broken. As the dust settled, humanity realized that the war was not over, but the resistance had taken a crucial step toward victory. The Tharkar had underestimated them, and now, humanity's fight for survival had entered its most dangerous, decisive phase. The war had come to a breaking point. After the destruction of the Tharkar's power source in the Himalayas, the resistance had delivered a blow that the invaders had not anticipated. The Tharkar, once so confident in their ability to conquer Earth, were now on the defensive. Their energy supply was crippled, their communication networks were down, and their most advanced weapons were no longer functioning as they had planned. Humanity, though still struggling, had gained an unexpected advantage, but the Tharkar had one final card to play. On the massive flagship that orbited Earth, Codex, the leader of the Tharkar, paced restlessly. His alien features, once serene and confident, now radiated frustration. The resistance had been more resilient than he had ever imagined, and the plan to deploy the Omega Bomb had failed. It was a crushing blow, but he was not ready to admit defeat. "The humans have proven to be more resourceful than we expected," Codex said to his council, his voice cold, "but they cannot withstand much more. We will crush them now. We have no choice. The war will end today." His council members, though wary, nodded in agreement. The time for negotiations for subtlety was long past. The Tharkar needed a solution that would end the human resistance for good. "We will take the fight to their capital," Codex said, a sharp gleam in his eyes. "Once we control Earth's major cities, they will have no choice but to surrender. There will be nothing left to fight for." Meanwhile, on the surface of Earth, the resistance was preparing for their final stand. They had fought hard and endured great losses, but now, they knew that the fate of the entire planet rested on their shoulders. Alex Pierce and Maria Vasquez, two of the leaders of the global coalition, gathered in the command center, looking over the map of Earth's remaining major cities. The resistance had been able to hold off the Tharkar from most of the planet's critical areas. But the final assault was coming. "This is it," Alex said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the moment. "We need to strike first, or we won't have a chance to survive." Maria looked at him, determination in her eyes. "We've shown them that we can fight. We've proven they can be defeated, but now we need to go for the heart of their operations. We need to take down their fleet once and for all." The plan was simple. The resistance would launch a coordinated attack on the Tharkar's remaining strongholds, targeting their flagship, the Dread Eclipse, and their remaining warships in orbit. The goal was to neutralize their command structure and take away the last of their ability to control the invasion. It was a long shot, but it was humanity's only chance. While the leaders of the resistance finalized the plans for the ground assault, Dr. Evelyn Markham and her team worked tirelessly to develop a weapon that could help turn the tide. They had discovered a weakness in the Tharkar's advanced technology, something that could be used against them. The Tharkar relied heavily on their energy siphons, drawing power from Earth's core. If they could overload the system once more, it could disrupt the alien fleet's ability to function. "I think we can do it," Dr. Markham said, looking over the plans. "If we target the energy conduits that connect to their ships, we can disable their fleet's engines. Without power, they'll be sitting ducks." But the Tharkar were already moving. The moment they detected the Resistance's plans, they began to fortify their positions. Their final assault was set into motion, and they began their descent into Earth's atmosphere. Codex was determined to make an example of Earth, to show the galaxy that no species could challenge the Tharkar and survive. As the Tharkar warships began to descend, the sky above Earth turned dark with their massive ships. The invasion was no longer a battle for cities. It was a battle for the survival of the planet itself. The resistance fighters gathered in their respective groups, their resolve hardening. They would fight no matter what the cost. Alex Pierce led a group of elite fighters to the front lines, where they would have to make their way to one of the largest Tharkar warships. The mission was dangerous, but it was the only way to turn the tide. As they made their way toward their target, they saw the Tharkar ships hovering overhead, casting a massive shadow across the land. "This is it," Alex said, his voice filled with purpose. "We take down the flagship, we take down their command. It ends here." As the Resistance fighters prepared to board the enemy vessel, the first explosions rang out. The Tharkar had initiated their final assault, but the Resistance was ready. Their strategy had worked. Thanks to their attacks on the energy siphons, the Tharkar systems were destabilizing. The once mighty warships began to falter, unable to maintain full power. Maria Vasquez led another team that launched a series of devastating attacks on the Tharkar's ground-based defenses. They struck quickly and relentlessly, taking out key infrastructure and sabotaging supply lines. The Resistance was everywhere, underground, in the skies, on the ground, and in the heart of enemy territory. Inside the heart of the Tharkar flagship, Korik watched in disbelief as his fleet began to lose control. The human Resistance had done the impossible. Their attacks were coordinated, precise, and devastating. His fleet, once so invincible, was now crumbling under the pressure. "No," Korik shouted. "This cannot be happening." But it was happening. The Tharkar were losing, their mighty empire was faltering, and Earth's defenders were proving stronger than anything the invaders had expected. The human spirit had triumphed over their technological superiority. Alex Pierce and his team finally breached the core of the dread eclipse. They fought their way through the alien ship's defenses, planting explosives in the critical systems. With each step, they knew that this was the moment. If they could destroy this ship, the war would be over. "We're almost there," Alex said as they planted the final explosives. "Let's finish this." With a final resounding blast, the dread eclipse exploded in a spectacular display of light. The shockwaves reverberated across the atmosphere, and the remaining Tharkar ships began to fall, their engines disabled and their systems in disarray. The Resistance had struck at the heart of the invaders' operation, and the result was nothing short of a victory. On the ground, the battle raged on, but without their command structure, the Tharkar forces were disorganized. Resistance fighters moved swiftly, pushing the alien invaders back and reclaiming Earth's cities one by one. The Tharkar, once so powerful, were now retreating. As the sun began to rise over a world freed from alien oppression, the leaders of the Resistance stood together, watching the retreating Tharkar ships. The war was over. Earth had won. Maria Vasquez turned to Alex, her face tired but triumphant. "We did it," she said quietly. Alex nodded, his expression filled with both relief and exhaustion. "We never gave up. We fought for what was ours." The battle for Earth had been long and hard, but humanity had proved that no matter how powerful the enemy, the human spirit could never be broken. They had fought for survival, for freedom, and for the future of their planet. The Tharkar had underestimated them, and now, Earth stood victorious. The Tharkar might have been a powerful empire, but they had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity would never be enslaved. And as the Resistance looked to rebuild their world, they knew that no matter what challenges the future held, they had already proven that they could face anything, together,